What is going on, fellow web developers? My name is Tyler Potts, and today we're going to be building a to-do list application using Vue JS, but we're going to be doing it with a twist. We're going to be building the entire thing with Vueform. Now, I explain what Vueform is in a moment, but first let's actually demo what we're going to be building. So this is our task list application. You can add in a new task, let's say get milk. We can select if this is a personal task or a business task, and then we can hit submit. So you can see here we have a get milk. The next thing we could do, as you can see, there is also validation here when you do not enter an actual element in the field. And what I'm going to say here is, for example, work on client video. This would be a business one, so we can submit that. You can see they highlight with different colors here. We can also rearrange these, and we can also edit them to say work on clients medical video, for example. Hit save, and there you go, that's now updated there. And if we refresh the page, you'll see it is still here because it's using local storage to store it in your browser. So now this list is super audible and super workable with, and then when you're done with your task, you can easily just remove it from the page. So that's what we're going to be building in this video, guys. So let's actually get into it. All right, guys, so it's time to talk about the sponsor of this video, which is Vueform. So Vueform is a framework for Vue to build forms. Vueform is a comprehensive form framework for Vue that makes form development a breeze, and honestly it really does. You're going to see how easy it is to make such a complex form in ease. They also have a drag and drop form builder, which I'm going to talk about more soon, which is really awesome. Now, Vueform is different to just a standard UI library. Vueform actually has solutions for problems that come up in development, such as conditional handling, breaking forms into steps, validation, accessibility support, and many more things. You can find all about what Vueform has to offer on their website here. You can see how extensive it is just here with all these different options here. You can go in here and just select multi-select. You can have a range extender, dates, really nice looking date, and this all just built into Vueform, and it's really easy to use. As you can see on the right here, you create a Vueform, you enter the elements you want with some options. Some of them don't even need options, and there you go, and it just works. Now, Vueform actually have a Discord server with over 500 people, so if you are building a form and you need some help, feel free to hop in their Discord server. I'll link it down below, and you can actually ask for help with anything you're working on, or if you just have some general questions and you want to ask them about it, you can actually do that on their Discord server. So another platform they offer is the Vueform Builder. Now, this is a really time-saving tool here. This tool is incredible, and if I wasn't doing a tutorial, I would probably be using this over anything else. Now, Vueform Builder is free, however, they do have paid versions, and I'll get into that in a minute. Now, the Vueform Builder has this demos page here. Now, the demo page is essentially the free online tool you can use to build a form. Now, we can clear this form, and we can just start building a form, for example. So let's just say we want it to have some tabs. So you can see tab 1 and tab 2, and then we can have a text field inside of here, and then on tab 2 we can have a number field, and you can see we can switch between these, and then you can just go over to preview to actually see it and test it. You can also customize each one on the right here by adding conditionals. The text field, you can change different things like the label. You can set this as your name. You could also remove this and add in a placeholder, and as you can see it says your name, and if we preview this and we click it, you'll see it will just work. And when we type in it, it will add your name at the top there with a nice little floating element. But the best bit about this is you can go into code and just copy out exactly what you need. So this will actually pull it all into your the code you need to be able to copy. You just smack this copy button and paste it into your already set up thing. And then if you need to install it, the things on the right here as well. It's super easy to use, and it's really useful. It also has options for different things like schema objects rather than the actual form, so it makes it easier to just work in the code rather than the HTML side of things. You could have it in line, or you could have it as a single file component as well. They also have options for the Options API and the Composition API, so you can choose which one you like to work with. It's super easy and it's real helpful when building a project. Okay guys, and the last thing I want to show off from this is actually their templates they already have. So you can actually come in here, load a template and choose a theme, and then go over to the code and actually get all the code you need here. So you can see here it can be converted all the way in, and you can have a fully working create account form with all the fields you probably need already built in. You can also then go in here and modify it as well. So we can go back to edit and let's say remove this and this if we wanted to, and you can go in here and edit it all. Another thing is they have a bunch of different ones here, so you can go through them all. You've even got an advanced search system here. They have last minute search. You can see there is a lot of templates to pick from, including edit profiles and notifications. You can see there's just a bunch of features and stuff already built in to their template system. So if you need a template or you're looking to build an account, a profile, you can get a basis already in here in templates. And I'm pretty sure they said they're going to be adding more to this as well in the future. You can go through here and also just change the theme of this as well. As you can see, I switched it to material. We can go to Bootstrap or the official Vue Forms colors as well. And yeah, so that is a Vue Form Builder. It's going to save you a lot of time and it is such a useful tool. Alright guys, now here's a fun fact about Vue Forms, just for those who like stats and stuff. Now the biggest ever form, or the largest form that has been built with Vue Forms, has 30 tabs and over 300 fields. It was for here you go, here's the quote, it was for one of the largest and most complex forms a user has created so far. It's a fire risk assessment form with roughly 30 tabs and more than 300 fields, which is just a fun little fact, and you can see the scale that Vue Form can actually go to. Now guys, I actually have a GitHub here as well, which you can go and check out and start if it's something you're interested in, and it'll really help the developers out, seeing that people like this product. Alright guys, so it's time to actually get started with building this application, and the first thing we'll do is actually come over to VS Code or any editor you want, whichever one you prefer. But what you do need is a terminal open in your root project. Now in here, I'm going to run an npm command, and I'm going to say npm create feat at latest, and I'm just going to put dot. Dot just means it's going to create the source code in the root of this folder instead of creating a new folder. I'm then going to do -- template, and then I'm going to pass in the Vue template for this. Now this is just going to build us our project and get it set up. Now while that's doing that, we can come over to Vueforms doc/installation. I'll leave all these links down below in the description, and we can select the framework we're using to Vue Forms. Now you can see here it supports some big platforms such as Vue, Nuxt, just standard Vue JS, and also Laravel. So I'm going to select Vue for this one, and then we can select the theme. Now out of the box, it allows you to use the official standard theme, which just comes with it. You can also integrate it with Bootstrap, Tailwind Material, and Tailwind Material, so if you use these by default, you may want to select one of these and then just use it that way, or you can select the official and just use it as standard. Now, once we have selected this, it's going to show us how we actually basically build it or set up, install Vue Form on our project. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy this, go back to my little thing here, and I'm just going to run npm run vueform/vueform. Hit enter, and that's going to basically install everything we need. Now we need to create a Vue Form config file, so I'm just going to copy this name from here, come into our root, create a new file, paste it in just like that, and then inside of here we can actually copy the code they provided to us over here, and we can paste that in. You can see that has done at the bottom there, so we'll come back to the terminal in a second. And there you go. We've now set up this. The next thing we want to do is go to our source and our main.js. And once again, we can come in here and it will tell you everything we need to actually add to it. In fact, we actually need to add to the feet config here. So I'm just going to copy this import, go back into feet config, and we're just going to add in the plugin for feet here, and we're just going to say Vue form and pass in parentheses here. This is just so it knows we're using Vue form. Now back in the main.js file, we can come back to our page here, scroll down, and we could just copy essentially this whole thing here. Copy it, or just the bottom bit. Copy, go back to our code, and just paste this in from here. And there you go, that will set it all up. So all we're doing is we're importing Vue form from obviously the Vue form package and the config we just set up, and then we're passing that in here. Now all of this actually in the documentation as well, so if you need to make some configurations or change things up, you can. Again, all the links will be down below, and you can learn all about Vue form down below. Now one last thing we're going to do is we just need to run npm run dev so our project actually starts up, and I can then open this link inside of our browser here, and there you go. You can see we've got the default feet plus Vue setup here, which we can then customize. Now, one of the first things we're going to do in the code is go into the style.css, and I'm just going to remove it all and just add a font family of sans serif here, just so we have a nice looking font. You can choose any font you want. Again, you can change this up and add this into any sort of site you're building. And there we go. Let's also close this and this. Now, we don't need a components folder for this tutorial, so I'm just going to remove it, including the assets as well. And back in app, I'm just going to delete what's in the current script, delete what's in the template. We could just put a H1 that says hello world for a second, and then let's also delete everything within our script file, our style script or style tag here. And there we go. Now if we go back to our browser, you can see it just says hello world. Now for the sake of ease of this tutorial, I'm just going to paste in the CSS here, and I'm going to be using Sass just to help a bit, and I'm just going to explain what this does. So we're just getting a page, we're setting in a background, a width, a min height, and a padding top. We're going to get the container and constrict it to 600 pixels and set a margin auto so it centers itself. We're then going to just set a nice size for the font or the title of this with some margin bottom and font weight. Then we've got a divider, which is just a HR tag that's going to have a margin, a border color, and then we're going to actually have the task container. Now this is going to be an individual task where we add in a background of white, a padding of 1 rem, and then if it's a business or personal, we're going to decide what color the actual what color the border is. Now we're going to have a wrapper as well, just to center everything and keep it all in line. And then we're just going to basically, for the sorting, so you're going to actually be able to drag and sort this, and we're going to be using the VF here. This is just basically the prefix that all Vue form styling has. So we're going to target that and then just check if it does and add in a top of 1 rem to move it down slightly. Now normally I would start with the template for this, but I think the actual functionality is going to play a big part in the template we set up, and Vue form will take some of these functions and run it in here. So I'm going to start off with the scripts, and the first thing we're going to do is import on mounted and ref from Vue. If you don't know what these tags are, if you never used Vue before, I highly suggest out checking some of my other videos where I explain these in more depth. I'm not going to go over these because this video is more based around building the to-do list app and Vue form. So once we've done that, I can then set a const tasks model, which we're going to set equal to a reference, which is going to be an object. And we're going to have our task. Now, this is going to be our array of our tasks, so a list of all the tasks we currently have. And then we need a Boolean, essentially, or not a Boolean, but an index, which is going to be called editing. Now, this is going to have the index of the task we're currently editing, but this is going to be used to tell everything else if we're editing a task already or if we're not. Now, another thing we're going to need is a function for our create a task. So we're going to say create task. We'll set this to data and then form $ here. These names don't actually matter. It's just what's being passed through. This is just what would a standard Vue form would normally use. And in here, we're going to create a function called add to storage. Now, this is going to be basically going to handle our creating a task and putting it in the actual storage section. And then what we're going to do is we're actually going to then sync from storage. Now, this is going to basically pull the data from our storage and actually say it to our tasks model. This will keep it up to date essentially, and then we can reuse both of these functions later on. Now, finally, we just want to clear our form or reset our form. So we're going to call form reset. Now, there's a function built into Vue forms. So the form we build, let's say you had a test or a text field and the text field and the actual radio select there, and you reset the form, it will reset back to its default values. Another option is to call clear. Now, clear will remove all the values, but it will not pull it to default values. It will just set all the values to nothing or null, which means there'll be nothing there. So this will completely clear it, but reset will pull it back to what its default values are. So I'll just add this in here, form dollar, if I can actually write a $sign, and then dot clear like that, and I'll just comment that out. So if you want to completely clear form, and this one will just reset form to default values. Now, this source code I will put up somewhere, probably GitHub, for you guys to actually come and download. So if you want to check out this source code, just check out the link down below. Now, the next thing we want to do is actually create the adds to storage and the sync from storage function. So let's just create those. So we can say add to storage, and as you can see here, this will take in a data which we get passed through. Now, what we want to do is let storage data equal local storage dot get item, and this can be tasks. We then want to say storage data is equal to, and then we're going to check if storage data exists. If it does, then we're going to pass it to storage data. Otherwise, we're going to just set a new empty array. So this is going to get this, and if it exists, we're going to pass that data into JSON. Otherwise, what we're going to do, or from JSON, sorry, into a JSON object for JavaScript. And then what we're going to do is actually create a new array if this doesn't exist. So if you have nothing in your local storage, this will default it to just a standard array. We're then going to get storage data and push our data into it. And then we're going to say local storage.set item. And we're just going to set the item of tasks to JSON.stringify and then storage data. So what we're doing here is we are just saying we're going to get the tasks, check if we have any tasks, if not, set a new array. Then we're going to put the new data we've just created from our creator tasks into our storage data. And then finally, we're just going to make sure we push this to our actual local storage in the browser. We then want to create our sync from storage. This one's a little different. This one is const sync from storage, which will just be a default arrow function. And this one essentially is just going to keep the task model up to date with the latest storage. If we ever push to storage or add to storage, what we're going to do is then sync it to our task models. So to do that, we're going to say let tasks equal, and we're going to say local storage dot get item tasks again. Now we're going to just say tasks model.value is equal to, and we're going to say tasks JSON.pass, and then we can pass in the tasks, otherwise an empty array. So this just checks if tasks exist. If it does, then we're just going to sell it to the task which were in our local storage. Otherwise, we will just sell it to an empty array again. Now this is just, we're using this essentially just to keep the task model up to date. You can essentially choose what you want to do with this data, but this is just probably the easiest way to keep it up to date. Now we need the opposite function for this as well. So we're syncing from storage, but we also want to sync to storage. So instead of from, we can say sync to storage. And this one is essentially just going to be the same as this set storage. However, this will be task.model or task model, sorry, not dot model, dot value dot tasks. And then we're just going to stringify that and set that to storage. So these are just a helper function we're going to use later on. So when we update our local tasks, we can then update our local storage to let it know. So this will create a new task. This will get the new tasks and actually sync it from our storage. So if we have any tasks in our storage, what it'll do is it will pull it from, and then we're going to save to our storage with this one. Now we need a couple other features. So we're going to need an edit function, which is going to pass in the index, which we're going to say tasks model dot value dot editing. So if you remember earlier, we added in this editing value, and we're going to just set this equal to our index. This is just going to let us know that we are editing. We're going to need to be able to cancel this edit. So if we don't want to make the changes, we don't have to. So what we're going to do is come in here and go pass in another index, and essentially we're just going to set this value to null, and then we're going to say sync from storage. So this is just going to pull our current storage and make sure it's back up to date, so it overwrites anything we tried to change. Now we don't actually need to pass in an index here. It's just this is something which will be passed anyway. We can then save the updated task. So what we want to do is come here and just say it here. We're going to say sync to storage this time, and then we're going to say essentially the same thing as here. So this one essentially makes it null and then basically overwrites any changes we made by pulling it from our local storage. We then save it. So this time, instead of making it null first, what we do is sync to storage, which will save the current one and then make the editing null. Finally, we need our onMounted function to be called, and all we're going to do is sync from storage at the start of our when the component is mounted. This will just make sure our storage is all set up and loaded. All right, guys, so that is the end of the scripts. This is all we need to get this working. All of these are just some really helper functions for us to just build our form. So to get started, we're going to have a diff in our thing with the class of page. We're then going to have another one with the class of container. This will just make sure it's all centered, and then we'll have a h1 which will have the task list. You can name this whatever you want. You don't even have to do the same styling. I just wanted to have that in. Now, the next bit is we're going to actually set up our Vue form. Now, we don't need to actually import this from our from anything, because we're actually setting Vue to use it by default in our main.js, if you remember what we did earlier. Now we can add some options to this, such as size. Now you can check out more about the size on their documentations, but essentially I can set the size to large, and this will make the elements just larger in general inside of the form. You can also set this to small, MD, or just set nothing to it and it'll default to whatever the default is. We can then set the endpoint for this to be our create task function. You could also pass in a string and just pass in the endpoint. So you could have a URL here, endpoint, for example, / post form, for example, just something like that, or whatever your endpoint is here. However, we can just leave it as create task because we want to locally manage this inside of our setup script here. So this is the way you would handle that. The next thing we want is our text input. So we want a text element. Now this comes from Vueform. You can see it on the right here. And what we can do is then give it a few values. Now we need the name. The name will actually be the name of the value we get from creating our task in this form data. This form data will essentially hold what this Vue form creates. So this create will pass in data and form $, which will hold the actual data of the form, which will have in all the fields here. So you can see here, this one will be a named task. We can then add a placeholder called add a task, We can have it floating. Now this will be the name that appears floating when you actually select it. So we can say task name, and then we can just put rules and just say required. So this each element can have a set of rules, and rules that are basically validation for your field. Now if we go back to our field here, okay guys, and make sure you don't accidentally capitalize the F in Vue form here, because that causes errors. So now we've got this, we can go back in here and you can see the all the validation is working. We can add in different text, and you can see the actual label is updating, and the floating name is also updating here. So the next element we need is a radio group element. Now this is used essentially for radio elements, selectables, and we can pass in the name here, which we're going to call type. We can then pass in the items which we want to be selectable. So the first one is going to be personal, and the next one is going to be business. We then want the type the Vue. Now this can be some different values. Tabs will allow it to be basically nice looking tabs. And the default value for this one, we want to actually set it to be personal. And then we can finish this off like that. And there you go. You can see this is how it looks here. Finally, what we need is a submit button. So we're going to call a button element. And in here, we're going to have a name. We can call this just a button. We can have it aligned to the right side, and we want it set to submits. Now, submits just tells it to actually essentially submit the form. If you don't have this, it'll act as just a default button and won't submit the form. Now, what we want to do in here is just pass in a name. Now, we can just call submit, or we can do create. And if we go back here, you can see it says create here, and we can actually go in here and create. And in our application local storage, you can actually see that that has been added. We can have enough one, let's say get milk, create, and you can see that gets added. Enough one is do your job, you know, standard business stuff, and click create, and you can see that is also in here as well, do your job at the bottom there. Perfect. So we know that's now working, and this is all set. Now the next thing is to actually have the list appear underneath. So what we're going to do is we're going to come back into our code here, and we're going to create a HR, and we'll just have the class of divider. This will give it the styling we applied earlier down here, the margin and the border. Now we want to create a new Vue form, and this one is going to have a few different elements. We're going to Vue model this one to our tasks model, and we're also going to pass in the sync attribute. Now the sync attributes updates the list when task model changes. So when this changes, it will actually update our list we create in here. And without sync, it won't actually update it, which so it is needed. So we then want to create a list element, which is going to have a name. Let's scroll up here. A name of tasks. And it's going to have controls, which will pass in a list, and this can be add false. So if this is by default, it will allow you to add new elements to the list without actually going through the form. What we want to do is make sure we can't actually add additional things. We also want to pass in the sort flag here, just to tell it that you can actually sort this. And then we want to use a dynamic class. So we're going to add class. And in here, we're going to have handle, and we're going to say task sort handle. Also, we can bring this sort down here, and then we want to add sort. So if we try and sort this list, what we want to do is run the sync to storage to actually update the storage. We then want to check if we remove any item, and we're going to sync to storage again. This just keeps it up to date, so we do not have to worry about saving or syncing. This is why we create these helper functions to actually help save and add functions. Now in here, we're going to create a template function or template tag, which is essentially what this is going to use to recreate over and over again. And we can just pass in the default index here is what we want to get from this. So this will pass us the index of this element. We then want to get an object element, which is essentially just a wrapper. It's like a div, essentially. It wraps the element in, and then we can pass in the name to this, and we're going to give it the name of its index, and then we're going to add class to this. Again, another conditional class, and we're going to pass in task container, and then we're going to pass in a conditional tasks model dot tasks, and then we're going to get the index of this task. So this is going to select the current object or task we want, and then we're going to check if the type is equal to personal, and if it is, we're going to say is personal is the class we're going to apply. Otherwise, we're going to apply is business here, and we can close this and bring this down. So this is essentially the wrapper. Now in here we want a button element which will help us actually edit this. So if you go in here, you can actually see how this is looking here from the task we have saved. I'm actually going to open this and show the local storage just so we can see why these are here. You can see we have 2 personals and 1 business in there. And we can also sort these, and as you can see in the list, it gets sorted in real time. It looks like the sort handle is actually having some issues here, which I think we can actually fix. We'll fix in a minute when we actually continue on. So inside of our object element, we just want to create another button element, and this button element needs to have a label. And let's just break this down there. And this label will have a we'll use template strings here, or template literals, and we're going to say hashtag, and then we're going to pass in the index +1, and then we're going to add a hyphen, and then this is going to be our task name. So what we want is task or tasks model dot task, and then we're going to get the current index. So this will get us our current task, and then we just want to get the actual task. So now if we can also pass in edit here. So when we click on this label, it will automatically try and edit this for us. We then just need to pass in a name, and we're going to call this the edit. Align this to the right. And then we're going to pass in a condition. And this will only be visible if we are editing and it's not equal to the index. We're then going to set the columns here to a label of 8. And then we want to use a click which just says edit, and we can pass in the index. So now you can see on the actual page here that it's looking a lot better. We actually have this and an edit button here. So we have the button, but the next thing we actually need is the actual text element we write into when editing our element. So we're going to create in a text element which is going to have a name of task. We will then have a condition or conditions, and this condition will just be if the editing is equal to the index. And this way it will say columns 6. So you can, let's just, this is a self-closing tag. There we go. So you can see here that the text element will take in a name, a condition, and a column. So this will just set to 6 columns, so it'll only take up 6 of the actual columns here. The name will match the name of the tasks in here, tasks. And what we're going to be doing with this is going to be what we use to edit. This will only be visible when we're editing it. This one will only be visible when we're not editing it. Now, if we want to be able to edit if it's a personal or business one, we can add in another radio group element like we did earlier. So we can just steal this, come under here, paste that in. But instead of it's saying personal business, we're going to change this to an object. And then with this, we can actually set personal with a custom piece. So this will pass the value of personal, but it will show the label of P. And then we can do the same with the business and just set the letter to be B. We also want to set this columns here to be 2. This is just so it should be that, so it passes in a number. And this will just allow it to obviously be 2 columns. We then need a conditions at attribute, which is going to be equal to an array, again, with editing and index. So this will also only show when we're editing this index. And then we need another button element. So I'm going to steal the edit button element, bring it in here. And this is going to have the name of cancel. It will not need an align. Its editing can actually be removed, so it can be equal to index. So when editing, it's equal to index. We also want to leave the columns to be 2. We want this word to say cancel as well. And on click, all we're going to do is call our cancel function. We can also remove this label from it as well. And finally, underneath this, we just want to set it to be the danger and full button there. This will just allow it to show the danger color instead of the default green color we want there. And then finally, we can copy this button, paste it underneath, remove the danger from it. Keep this at that, same as this, change this to be save, call the save function, and then also change this to say save as well. So we added in this editing thing here, and we can't just have this as a null thing in our form. What we need is to have a hidden element that actually holds the data for this here. So we'll call this editing. It's just a hidden element which will just essentially be there, which tells us we've editing one or we're not editing. So now on our form, we can actually click edit and change this. So let's change that to 9. Also make it personal. You can see it actually changed live there. And if we hit save, it now says do your job, but it's no longer personal. We can also change it back to business and say build a website. Save that, and now we can add a new one. And as you can see, this is actually the task list complete here using Vue Form. It's so easy to use, and there's so much more to it from what I've shown today. You 100% need to go and check out the documentation, because all of the features I use are well documented in the documentation, and it has a lot there. So now we can say make a YouTube video, create, and there we go. Let's bring this to the top of our list, and you can see all the features are working here. It's super easy to use. And yeah, that's it. And it also comes built in with the sorting, removing, and everything else. So guys, that's going to be the end of this tutorial. So don't forget to like, subscribe, and comment on this video. And also, don't forget to check out Vue Form. Go check out their Discord if you need help with it. Don't forget to check out their website and the documentation. And also, don't forget to give them a star on GitHub. All of these links will be down below, including the Vue Form Builder if you're interested in seeing how that works and actually just making a form really quickly with that. But that's going to be it for this video, guys. I will see you in the next one. Peace out.